Greetings. This is Caroline Staten with Transition US, and thank you so much for joining us today on our teleseminar. And our principal aim with these teleseminars is to provide practical support to the leaders that are building resilience all over the country. And also, we really want to offer these events at no cost, and we do appreciate those of you who are able to make a donation. It really helps make this work happen. I can't stress that enough. So thank you so much for doing that. So today's event is on self-leadership, practices for hosting yourself and growing personal and community resilience. And at this time, complexity and uncertainty and vulnerability are huge factors in our human experience. And the typical response to such realities in our lives is often fear and stress and anxiety. And it takes a lot of personal mastery and self-hosting to stay present, creative, engaged, centered, brilliant, and talking during these times. So our wonderful guest today, Teresa Posakony, has done years of work in this regard, and her work has led her well beyond the bounds of corporate leadership and organizational development into an arena of community engagement and collective leadership and impact. And she's got 13 years of consulting and leading organizations in the high-tech industry, and she's taught about human potential, rapid change, adaptability, and how to live authentically as a leader. And Teresa now works nationally and globally with communities and organizations committed to social change. Her work locally in Washington State includes building statewide community networks focused on family and community resilience, community-based strategic and she works with a multitude of nonprofits and community-based organizations. And I've had the great fortune of working with Teresa for a couple of years now in some Art of Hosting events and participating in those events on the ground and in person, and I highly recommend that. So when you have the opportunity, do join an Art of Hosting event. Teresa, I know I didn't say everything there is to say about you, so if I've missed something that's really core to who you are and what you're offering, please let us all know that. And I wanted to turn it over to you now.
So welcome, everyone. It's just great to be on the call with you today and to be in this topic that I just care deeply about, as well as study very deeply, this whole sense of our own personal mastery, our self-mastery, and also relative to all the neurosciences and what the neurosciences are saying about self-mastery. And I think it's just really a really hugely exciting time because it's pointing in some real directions for how we can develop the suite of practices that help us to navigate the complexity, uncertainty, and vulnerability that Caroline's talking about. And they're just, as I know in my own life, and I think in all of our lives, it's just become, essential to have the set of practices that allow us to stay present. One of the ways I've been connected with the Transition US effort was we did 2 Art of Hostings, or Art of Participatory Leadership seminars in partnership with Transition down in the Bay Area, in the North Bay, Petaluma area, and Sonoma County, and then also just helping support some of the national work to weave these participatory leadership practices, these engagement practices, into transition efforts. Because it's all about how we are when we show up in the rooms with each other and how we hold conversations in an environment where there's just a lot of that stress that's going on. So really how we meet with each other and how we host ourselves makes all the difference. We wanted to start today just with a couple quick polls to kind of bring us all in the room and have us start thinking about this, as well as just to hear how many are also familiar with the art of hosting. And then we'll dive into the call. So the first poll question, and we'll give you an opportunity to use your keypad to join the poll, and the first question is to press 1 on your keypad if you participated in any Art of Hosting or Art of Participatory Leadership event. And to press 2 if you'd like to know about the Art of Hosting or Art of Participatory Leadership. And then press 3 if you just haven't heard anything about it at all and this sounds like a very strange title. So to join the poll, press 1 on your keypad if you've participated in any Art of Hosting or Art of Participatory Leadership event. Press 2 if you'd like to, but you don't know how and you'd like to know more. And press 3 if you just don't know quite what we're talking about when we say the Art of Hosting. And then Caroline will give us the poll results.
Yeah, they're coming in. So again, you've got those options. So those that pressed 1, Teresa, that have participated in an Art of Hosting or Art of Participatory Leadership event, it's 27% of the callers. 31% would like to, and 18% don't quite know enough about it.
Right, what is that? Great. Well, wonderful, and just welcome to all of you. The second poll is around your own sense of, do you have kind of personal mastery practices that help you to stay centered, help you to stay in your good thinking and your good connection with others? Do you have personal mastery practices that support you well in your work and life? And for the poll, 1 is a no, 2 is sometimes I have personal mastery practices, 3 is several times a week, and then 4 is daily.
You run those?
So, yes, so 1 is no, I don't have a personal mastery practice right now. 2 is sometimes I do. 3 is several times a week, and 4 is daily.
Great. So participants are pushing their buttons. And if you can't, by chance, if your keypad, if you're not calling in a way that works, that's fine too. So 11% indicated no, 29% indicated sometimes, 19% that's several times a week, and 25% daily. Great.
Well, wonderful. And so I hope that our call today really supports you wherever you are on the scale. Everything from kind of just hearing about what are some of the really simple personal mastery practices that you can have in your everyday. Or like if you haven't established personal mastery practices, like some of the new tools and practices that are connected with the neurosciences and a new level of resilience. I wanted today to do a piece of framing. It's one of the attachments that you have. And this is from the Art of Hosting or Art of Participatory Leadership. It's a core model called the Fourfold Practice. And there's a document for those that have availability to it. Otherwise, it's just fine if you don't. For me, what it does is it sets this personal mastery work right in the center of the kind of changes that we're trying to create in the world. It's like the Fourfold Practice is just a way within the Art of Hosting community that we just have a sense of that first it's about our presence. It's like how we show up in the room as a host of a conversation, as a participant of a conversation, how we're hosting the conversation with ourselves. Those things just really matter. It's our ability to be present to another, to be listening, our ability to work with our own kind of stress or overwhelm, our ability to kind of stand in the fire of change right now. When the roadmaps just really aren't available, where we just have to kind of lead through our senses, having access to our senses and our sense of sensing our way forward, feeling our way forward, finding which paths are open, finding the partners we need, working synchronously, and over time building our community capacity. So it all starts with presence and my own self-hosting work. And so this place of self-mastery is just really a central piece within what we think of as the participative leadership practices. And the participative leadership practices, is all about how we use dialogue to create change. So the second part in the art of hosting is participate. So you both hosting yourself and showing up in a good way when you're in your meetings. And then also, how do we meet each other? What happens as we are in a good place of presence or in a good place of clearness in our own thinking, in our own hearts, in our own emotions? What's the quality of relationship we can have with each other? And since we're so dependent on partners and colleagues and friends and co-conspirators, this way of what's our practices for how we meet each other? And if the other person also has some self-mastery practices so that they're able to both self-regulate as well as be really connected with their own creativity and dreams and higher level thinking, then more can happen. So this whole practice of participating is like, well, how do we set up environments where we meet with each other? And then sometimes there's efforts that you just know that they're yours to lead out on in your own community. I think a lot of the folks within the Transition US effort, it's like this is one of the things, the fire you feel in your belly. It's like it's yours to do. It's yours to lead. We had two transition folks in our recent Art of Hosting in Portland, Oregon. One was James, who's a firefighter down in San Diego, and he's literally on fire with all of this because he's just like so about resilience and so about how we lean into change and build our own capacity. But he's just talking about, it was just so clear it was in him, this some of the Transition Streets efforts that he was up to. You could feel it in your belly. And you could tell he's also been working with a lot of personal mastery practices, a firefighter, how to be in intense situations. So those going together and the essentialness of having that community capacity is the fourth one. We're co-creating change. We're co-creating communities, really trying to create places that have that resilience built in. So the resilience goes really at each of these four levels, and over time building that capacity, that presence, that ability to work together, into our communities and being communities that learn. So that's just a little bit of a framing, and it all comes back to the self. So with that framing in place, I just wanted to invite another poll. We're going to go and talk a little bit about, how stress shows up in our bodies, and, what's the different places between being in stress or a stress response, and then also kind of fostering this place of center or coherence. So I wanted to slow it down a little bit here too and invite another poll, kind of a checking in with yourself. And it's about your own stress level. So what is your stress level right now in your life, in your work? So taking a look in your own life, in your own work, and on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is low and 5 is high, what's the level of stress you're experiencing right now in your life, in your work?
So those are still coming in, Teresa.
Okay.
And so 1 being low, we have 4%. And some people press 2 on their keypad, 6%. Some people press 3, 21%. 4, 26%. And 5, 7% pressed 5, so a high level of stress.
Yeah. Okay. And I know that stress in my life kind of, there's peaks of stress, and then there's times when it's not, when it kind of has an oscillating scale. And sometimes in my life, it's been where there's been a high stress for a long period of time, and it's invited for me just a lot of personal work and a lot of personal growth. Those have been the times when I've actually needed most, when it's been those high periods of stress over a long period of time. Is a time when I've needed to be doing the deep inner work and be looking out in the world for what are some of the best self-mastery practices that are out there. And then how do we bring those into our community efforts as well as my own personal effort, my own personal resilience. So I just wanted to I'll introduce a couple of those today in the call and have us have a chance to practice it. And then also today I'll be introducing first one from Heart Math, and then I'll be talking too about what the neurosciences are saying around toxic stress and underlying health issues, and then how to work with our brains and our bodies and our emotions in a new way. So we'll be working with that and giving a whole suite of both practices and information from the neurosciences. And at some points in time here too, we'll get a chance to hear from everybody. So I think it'd be good to do first, even before explaining about heart coherence, I'll just give a headline for it. I'd love to invite people into this personal quick coherence practice. Just on the headline level with coherence, the Heart Math Institute's just done some really beautiful work about our hearts and how to have our hearts in coherence. When we have our hearts in coherence, there's the whole rest of our bodies is regulated or in harmony. So it's a good place of flow. And they have just a quick coherence technique. I use this sometimes at the beginning of meetings just to help people arrive. And we'll use it here as part of our call. And then I'll explain a little bit more behind what Heart Math has learned and how essential just knowing where you are on this in the scale of being in a stress response or being in a coherent place, how great that is for your own health. So what I'd invite is for folks to just go ahead and focus in on the area of your heart. Just bring your attention into the area of your own heart. And then as you focus on that area of your heart, imagine your breath is flowing in and out through your heart. As if the breath is initiated in your heart. Just breathing in and out. Inviting the energy that's in your head down into your heart. And from your limbs, just like all the energy goes back into just this focusing in your heart. Allow your heart, the heart area, to be doing the breathing. And as you continue to breathe through the area of your heart, think of a positive feeling. Connect with the emotion. Maybe it's gratitude. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's appreciation. Maybe it's a positive place. So just allow yourself to feel that good feeling, that positive emotion. And if you can't feel anything, that's okay. And hold the attitude of appreciation or care or compassion. And breathe that into your whole body. and then just trying to stay focused on that positive sensation as we continue our call. So HeartMath has a really come up with some really important information that has to do with the self-mastery. And it's this phrase about coherence. And it's they've been able to show through all the work with both the heart rate and the brain that and all monitoring all of the health systems, all of our body's regulation systems, that when our body is in coherence, then we have more access to resilience. This is resilience. There's flexibility and adaptability. And that when there's coherence, there's a regular pattern of our heartbeat. And it can go faster or slower, but it's in a regular pattern, and it connects us with positive emotions. Help the heartbeat to be more ordered and coherent. And then when we connect in with, you can call it negative emotions. I like to call it lower frequency emotions, such as fear, anxiety, anger. Then our heart rhythm pattern gets to be disorganized, disordered, or incoherent. So you can, and then there's 1,400 stress hormones that can be released in the body when we come into that, disorganized. Of course, not all of them all at once, but there's 1,400 different stress hormones in our bodies that are part of our regulation system, and they're here to help keep us safe and to help us navigate in stressful situations and to move really quickly. So HeartMath has a suite of both simple meditation practices and then a little simple heart rate monitor too, that just allows you to notice, like, when am I in coherence? And then also, when are we out of coherence? And the out of coherence is like, when are we in a stress response? And then for ourselves, just with that place of awareness of just being able to notice when we are in a stress response, how much impact that has on our physical body. All of having high cortisol levels impacts, all of the organs in our body, and has a whole suite of pieces in our stress response, and those can get to a place of being chronic, either because of life experiences. So kind of how to work with that line, and so they've been using the HeartMath tools and practices, within emergency room hospitals and with PTSD, and then just with everyday folks too. So just in all situations, just knowing about that line is really important. And they've also shown that that's when we have access to our creativity and our new connections as well. So I'd love to just open the floor and hear a few, like if there's 2 or 3 folks that want to share, what do they notice about, when can they notice that they've stepped over the line into the stress response? It's just like, or how do they relate to what I've just shared relative to the HeartMath? Is this something new, and how do they relate to that in their own lives?
So people could press 1 on their keypad to engage at this point, and we'll call on a couple of you. So we're getting started here. The first is Ian. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Hi.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi, Ian.
Hi. I don't think you could see it, but I think the first indicator of stress is a frown, something that has to do with your eyebrows, so you can't really see that from where I am. And usually people pick that up because of this sense of universal body language. Yeah. And so that's associated with an emotion that is associated to a memory that they are disappointed about.
Yes, there's some emotion that's there, and then there's the contraction, and you can see it in the frown, you can see it in the eyebrows, and that narrowing. Yeah.
Right.
I like that, Ian. And the universal body language, it starts to, go off a little bit in whatever, relationship or room you're in. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Shall we take another?
Yes, let's take two more.
Okay. Susan White, go ahead.
Hi. For me, it's just being present and the practice of when I'm present, then I can feel my body and I can feel whether I feel anxiety or not, So it's just, for me, it's just a constant practice of feeling my body. And then when I feel my breath, like what you did through the heart, or just feeling my breath, it allows me to then discover a thought that created the anxiety. And then if I let go of the thought, then I can come back in my heart, and my breathing goes back into resonance. It really comes down for me to hidden expectations that reveal themselves in some form of disappointment. And then when I let that go and I just come back to what might be revealed in the present moment, instead of expectations, then I'm clearer and more awareness comes, that I can operate from that state instead of operating from hidden fear-based expectations.
That's beautiful, and just all the ways you're talking about how your thoughts and expectations and emotions and body, like your own awareness practices. And
right, exactly, yeah.
Our last one for this segment is Priscilla Rich. Go ahead.
Yes, I work in dealing with climate change issues pretty directly, and when I get involved in projects that I know are stressing my thought process, I don't sleep well at night. And I've gotten to a point where I can't put the thought processes away, and I've gotten very good at focusing while I'm in bed with these thoughts running through my brain, sort of refocusing it and channeling it into, well, what am I going to do about this when I wake up in the morning?
Right.
And re-channel it into basically a creative process. What am I going to do? How am I going to act on this? Who am I going to call? Sort of turn it into something I can actually act on and be proactive instead of stressing me out. And then once I say, okay, I've thought this through, I'm ready to wake up tomorrow morning, but I still need to go to sleep. I calm my body, I let it turn into mush, or think of it like soft butter, and just let it go.
Yeah. And I love
how I practice that.
And I love just even kind of how much you're noticing kind of that, that monkey mind, or that, the rat wheel going on. It's just like how much as we're in, whatever level of stress-based emotion, or in a strong emotion of any kind, that how much our minds can kind of engage with that. And it's a real strong feedback loop. So it kind of keeps going. And then, just your own practices of how to shift that, into a more creative place, accessing other parts of your brain, as well as then into a, calm place. So just really you're both on the moving it towards creativity and then moving it towards rest. I love what you shared with that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's, especially the last couple callers were able just through those simple stories, just be sharing so much about the connection between our physical body, our emotional bodies, and our mental bodies, and how much what's happening in our minds is connected into what's happening, down in our physiology of, not being able to sleep, And I think especially with issues around climate, it's like these are pretty scary things. I mean, just the kind of the numbers and the situation, and being able to be present to the climate conversation, it's a big deal. And I think in most places we're not able to be present with this because it takes us into a fear response that we're just really, it's easier to just not look oftentimes. For us individually, it's like we'll just being able to do our own deep inner work so that we're in a good way as we're holding those conversations matters. And also just knowing how much the stress is there in the community and the fears there in the community. And how fast that can get triggered in the places that we are. So finding a good way to come back in with it and work through some of the emotions of grief too that are present as we're seeing the rate of change that's happening. So with that, I'd love to just invite us into, as a whole group, another experience, another exercise. And this exercise just helps us put in touch with, what's all of the callers shared about just noticing what's happening in the physical body in relation to the different emotions. And what I'd invite, and I love doing this live in a room, and it's fun to do over the phone too. And it's just to be in some really good body awareness here. So what I'm going to do is I think you can make better faces when you're on the phone because nobody's looking, and really take the shapes of this. I'm going to invite you to kind of like either sitting or standing up, just to take on the shape. It's almost like you're making a body sculpture, and having a really good expressive face. Maybe, and then using your hands in whatever way you want to use your hands, and your shoulders in whatever way you use your shoulders, and just take on the shape of different emotions. And I'm going to name a few of the stress-based emotions, and then I'm going to name a few of the higher frequency emotions. And just notice in your body what shape you're in. And then after we're done, we'll get to hear from a couple different callers what they noticed too. And then I'll just call out a word. So I'm just going to take a couple breaths. So find the shape of anger. Make sure you make a good face with it too. What's your shape of anger? Just where you feel it in your body. And shifting. Take the shape of worry. What's the shape of worry? Notice what happens with your brow, your head, your belly. And then take the shape. So shift, sit back up straight. And now take the shape of sadness. Or grief. So shift and sit up straight. So now take the shape of creativity. What's your body do when you're feeling really creative, like wildly creative? What is the shape of creativity? What happens with your hands and your eyes? Your jaw. And shift. Take the shape of love. What's the shape of love feel like in your body? and shift. Take the shape of joy. And shift. So with that, I'd like to just open up and hear from a couple callers.
So press 1 on your keypad.
And just to share what your experience was of that and what you notice in your body.
Maxine, go ahead.
Yeah, so I noticed that the first 3 all were contractive. Felt my brows tighten, my face clench, and the area of my stomach, like the upper, just between my rib cage, really tight with each of the first 3. And then the others were literally physically expansive. So my chest was out and up. My face even was tilted up, and it was more like in-breath rather than a holding of the breath. So, yeah, very, very good dynamic awareness of what these different emotional states result in the body and with the breath.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have Lori. Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, thank you. What I noticed is that my hands seem to be the center point of the expression. Like they felt like the most important part of my body in the expression, I guess partnered with my facial expression. Sorry. And the other thing that I noticed is where my hands wanted to go felt really important. For example, with worry, my hands had to be on my face, like, like one hand on each cheek or covering the mouth. And the interesting thing about creativity compared to the others, with creativity, I couldn't hold still. I had to keep moving. I could not find one place where I was content for creativity, but in all of the others, it was like a freeze frame. So I found that interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so creativity is in motion, Yeah, for you. That's neat.
And the last one for this segment is Carolyn. Go ahead.
Hello. I think the other 2 have spoken much of my own experience, but what I'd like to add is the first set felt so heavy, just so heavy. And even constricting of the breath, it was so heavy. And then the last ones felt light by comparison, and my breath just flowed.
Great.
So that's what I like to add.
Thank you. And I love that like the heavy and the light. Those are good descriptions too. And then just like my breath just flowed. There was a real different quality in your breath. Your access to your lungs. And I think when we're in a stress-based response in one of the contractions, it's like we don't have as much access to our breath. So your noticing of the breath is really wonderful. For me, this place of just during the day, just noticing what shape I'm in, and I'm just really conscious of, okay, what shape am I in? Is it in a contraction? Or is it in an expansion? And just knowing that when we're in the contraction and we're in the, those lower frequency emotions, that the main part of our brain that's operating is the amygdala or the reptilian brain, the lower part of our brain. And it has first priority in our nervous system because it's the one that's designed to keep us safe. to get us out of danger. And it has a real sharp place of focus. So I always notice that there's also a narrowing of my eyes. Like if I'm in the expansion space, I have more access to my peripheral vision. And if I'm in a contracted space, it's also a narrowing of the eyes. And that's because it's to help us to have pinpoint attention to get us out of danger. And the stress-based hormones also allow us to navigate and get out of danger. So just noticing when you're in, I might just be like, oh, look, my shoulders are contracted. And then I start saying, oh, what's the emotion that's there? Because there's a connection with an emotion. What's the sensation in the body? What's the emotion? And then as we notice too, what are the thoughts that are connected with it? I love kind of starting at the body because, it has a lot to say just in whatever shape it's in, and just if it's in a contraction or an expansion. So that's about the amygdala. So knowing when you're in a stress response or you're in those lower frequency emotions. And it's the words that come with that is that you've got the energy of fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Those are the trigger. You're in a trigger, so you're triggered. Something's cued you in your environment, and this is the way that your nervous system is responding. When we're in expansion, we have access to a different part of our brains, the prefrontal cortex, behind your forehead there. And that part of the brain is responsible for creativity, making good short and long-range plans, all the higher level thinking. So when we're in contraction, we're working from there, we're not going to have access to our best solutions or decisions or clear thinking. And also we're cut off from a lot of our resources because our eyes have narrowed versus being really expansive. And being able to see help coming even, when we're in our stress response, it's hard to see, gosh, we have all these resources available to us. And we're more contracted around our physical hearts too. There's a lot of issues around our health that are connected. So with that, for me, I part of what I've really been studying a lot over the last decade, especially. We've been in an effort in Washington State that's been about how to reduce trauma in communities generation to generation. So I've been studying a lot about how trauma, and especially early childhood trauma, but all trauma, how it templates into the body, and where do these stress-based responses come from? And because what I find is that I have a few shapes that I take on a regular basis. One for me is worry, and my brain gets really busy and my shoulders get hunched and my head's forward, my forehead's forward, I'm looking down, and my mind's kind of spinning, and the emotions worry that goes with that. And what I found out is once I started looking, oh look, that's the pattern of worry. And it's my friend commented to me, she says, Teresa, that pattern's it's not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to you, especially not to you, but it's not helpful to the situation. And then in this case, it was my daughter had a concussion. So I'd gone into serious worry over my daughter. She says, it's not helpful for your daughter because she meets this woman with this kind of scowled face. This is the mom. She's looking for someone to love and support her. And she's got a woman with a scowled face that's got a worried brow is the mom she meets. So just with that, I know I've got a long line of worrying going back in my family. It's a family pattern. And what the neurosciences have shown is that our core emotional patterns are transmitted to us, using mirror neurons, like we're mirroring what's happening with our parents' bodies, in our early childhood, and also based on what environments we're in. Our DNA is actually changing in our early childhood based on the environments that we're in. These are core energetic patterns, core emotional patterns. They're also core neural pathways in the brain. They've hooked up moms and babies. and shown that, the neural pathways that the mom has, the frequent neural pathways that they regularly go down is the same in the baby. So they're showing how these patterns, or these core emotional patterns, are just imprinted in us early on. So they can feel like who we are. Our brain's in a delta state in those early years, and so it's kind of in our subconscious. It's going on all the time, but we can't see it. So some of these awareness practices, like the one we did, just help us to see it. It's like, that's a different kind of mirror to look in, So starting to be able to, work with these unconscious programs and patterns is just key to help us build more resilience, to help us to be more in the expansive space. It's kind of like, for me, it's like, gosh, they didn't give me an operating manual to tell me how the brain works, how the emotions work, how the bodies work in relation with each other. And so that's all coming really clear with the neurosciences. And so I feel like I have a way to fix this vehicle of my own body. So what I'd love to do is to just talk a little bit about that, kind of how the brain, the body, and the emotions work together. And then how to, what I call mind the gaps, how to create some space in between, in between our minds and our emotions, in between our emotions and our physical bodies, just minding those spaces in between as part of the strategy for how to foster a higher level of well-being. And I can't emphasize enough the work of trying to, shift from some of these contracted patterns, some of these lower frequency emotions, into the higher frequency emotions. And over time, it's kind of like getting a spine back and getting your shoulders, getting your breath back, getting your clear thinking back. Those are the things that we can benefit from as we keep working with these practices to shift some of these core emotional patterning and core neural patterning. The good news is that's something we can do, and all of the neuroplasticity shows how much we can shift these kind of like these ruts in the snow, if you will, and these deeply imprinted patterns. So I'd love to just take a couple minutes and talk about the mind or the brain, and then the core emotion patterns and the body. And just I'll share a couple little tools for getting underneath that. I think, though, maybe we'll just do an exercise right now, and this will just help us be centered, but it's also one that no matter what's going on, it's something that I use. It's a four-sided breath. And it's like I can be feeling a strong emotion, and I can go to the four-sided breath. My mind can be racing, and I always have the four-sided breath. And if I'm in the four-sided breath, it's changing the posture I'm in as well. So I just want to give this four-sided breath as one of the practices that I work with every day, all during the day. And eventually what I hope is that this is just my normal breath, that I stay in this centered breath. That's what I'm working toward. So I'd invite you to have your tongue on the roof of your palate, in a comfortable place, whatever that is for you, back behind the teeth, just to place your tongue on the top of the roof of your palate. It's sweet because it has the benefit of starting to calm down our nervous system when we do that. And then to notice the spot, and you might even want to put your hand there. It's below your belly button, 2 inches below your belly button and 2 inches back towards your spine. So the space of center that's below your belly button. And then between here, I'm going to have us do a four-sided breath. So to breathe in and then pause, breathe out and then pause. So just join me in that. So starting in your center, down in your belly, 2 inches below your belly button, 2 inches back towards your spine. Initiate the breath from there. In, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Out, 2, 3, 4, and hold. In, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Out, 2, 3, 4, and hold. And a few more breaths on your own. So this is a go-to for me. One of my practices, I started doing it about a year ago when I was introduced to it by Joey Klein, who wrote a book, The Inner Matrix, and he really teaches about the study of how this body, this physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual mastery, and how to work it together. And the first week of the exercises in the book, and I've been doing this I'm studying my third class series. The one I'm in right now is called Mental Mastery. But the four-sided breath is just like he introduced me to doing an awareness practice every hour during the day, just setting a timer. And then just whenever the timer goes off, just to notice, what's happening with my mind. Where is it? What are my thoughts? Where are my emotions? And what's the sensation in the body? No judgment, just awareness. And then the four-sided breath. That's the first weeks of exercises. But it's just the noticing and then knowing you always have your four-sided breath. So you always have a centering breath available to you. And so for me, that's a go-to place. And also this awareness practice. I don't set my timer as much anymore, but all through the day I just pause and notice what's happening at each of those levels. What's sensation in my body? Where's my emotions? Where's my thoughts? And over time, working with them, and there's a whole suite of practices in the Inner Matrix, and he has an emotional mastery series to how to upgrade to the higher frequency emotions. So what are the practices that support us in over time coming more and more from the high frequency emotion? Not from a place of just positive thinking. That can be helpful too, but really in a way that helps shift the core emotional patterns. Just wanted to share a few things at each of the layers. The first is the layer of the brain or the mind, and that we have 60,000 thoughts a day. So most of those are unconscious. We don't know they're going on. And as I tune into my own, inner matrix, my own mind, most of them are in the stressful thoughts. Our mind's trying to figure things out for us, and we're running a lot of thoughts in the background. So 60,000 thoughts a day, and a lot of them are connected to the stress-based emotions. So those are getting priority in our nervous system. Most of them are not focused on the visions of what we're wanting to create. So with our minds and disciplining our ability to focus our minds, it allows us to actually spend a lot more of our energy, a lot more of our good thinking, our good minds, our good mental capacity, our creativity on the things we're actually trying to create. So for me, the mental mastery and coming into that, working with meditation practices, being very conscious of where my thoughts are, learning how to still my mind, learning how it works in relation to my emotions. All these things just make up so that I have a lot more of my mental power, my creative power, my intuitive powers to be going towards what I do want to create, instead of putting so much of that energy towards the stress-based thoughts that are going on in the background. Because I only get 60,000 thoughts a day, so I'd like most of them to go towards positive things that I want to do. So I'm working towards that. And it's still a long road. I don't have that focus yet, but I'm working on that. And now with the emotions or the emotional body. And so the mental body, the emotional body. The emotional body, and an emotion, if it's not connected to a thought, this is from Daniel Siegel and his work on mindfulness, the emotion itself would only last 90 seconds. So fear, if it's not connected to all our thoughts of fear, it just would only last 90 seconds if it's expressed in its own way in our nervous system in the smallest way. So it's really good information when it's that way. But then it can really quickly overtake our lives as it's connected to our thoughts. Worry can run in me a lot, occupying a lot of my time and my energy and in a narrow range, because remember when we're in our stress-based emotions, it's narrowing or contracting. So I'd rather be in those positive emotions that are expansive, that access my prefrontal cortex, accesses the part of my brain where I can be in my higher levels of thinking, my higher levels of work. So this both attentive to whether your emotions are the lower frequency or fear-based or higher frequency really matter. And then over time, working with them so more and more we can come to, be accessing that beautiful part of our emotions and our brains. And what I find is the most beautiful part of our emotions is just life's easier if I'm working from the higher frequency emotions. I can think more clearly. People like me more. I think I'm funnier. My son would debate that. So all of those things. And then just to know that these patterns are deeply imprinted, our core emotional patterns, really early on. So it's just, that to me is just a level of kindness, that we can be very kind to ourselves when we notice these emotional patterns, because it's not our fault. And especially for folks that have had a difficult childhood, those patterns are so deep, and we can change them in getting into those practices. And then the body matters. I notice when I'm in a posture, in my worry posture, like if I just sit up straight, and change my posture, I don't have access to those worries in the same way. So I think the work of generative somatics has been brilliant here. Just noticing that all these holding patterns are in our bodies. And so working with our physical bodies, both through exercise, but also, embodiment practices that help us to just, change the shape, and to change, as we change the shape of our response, as we work on the physical level, work towards physical levels of well-being, that also supports our resilience. So kind of like working well-being at all these levels, I like to work on, the power of transformation is when we work the physical, emotional, mental, and the spiritual together. The spiritual is really access to our intuitive intelligence and on our brilliance and all our support systems and nature. So for me, some of the practices here that help, I kind of think of them as minding the gap processes. So one's that awareness practice, every hour checking in, what's happening at physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, how am I connected to my source? And then just building that awareness practice in. And the second's the four-sided breath, and knowing what that is. And then there's a whole suite of personal and emotional and mental mastery practices that just help us reframe or for me it's a tune-up. It's like I really want to be in a place of well-being, and if I'm in that expansive place, I can be more deeply of service with my good mind and my good heart. And all of those are practices of resilience, both relative to our own health, but also relative to our own communities. And we found in our work in Washington that so much of the resilience and these sort of practices, when they come in at a community level, it's really transformational. So I'd like to pause here and take a couple more callers. We're scheduled to go until a quarter after the hour. So I'd love to hear how people are relating to these different patterns of well-being and that sense of minding the gap in between.
So people can press 1 on their keypads with questions or comments, and we'll call on you. Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was reminded of something that I often forget, but it helps me when I remember, which is the language around the draining emotions. We say, I am angry, I am mad, I am this, that, and we almost, identify with the emotion, and we can still honor the information in the emotion by saying, I'm experiencing anger, or and that, when I remember to do that, it's a huge help.
Huge help, yeah. And knowing that it's at all these levels. I'm experiencing that in the sensations in my body. I'm experiencing that in my emotional body. I'm experiencing that in my mind and the ways my thoughts are going. Yeah.
And Margaret, go ahead.
Well, two things. One is I appreciate this idea about the core patterning from our parents and stuff, because of working in communities of violence, and it's so hard to. Well, society does not understand this, so they just blame people. But my question is also the last sentence you said about when you bring this into the community and you have communities doing this. Well, how do you do that? Maybe that's in the rest of your talk.
Yeah. It's also in a paper that is one of the other resources. There's a paper that I wrote, and there'll be a second generation written sometime here, but it's Neurobiology and Social Justice Leadership. And that really outlines, with some of the work we've been doing here in Washington, and points to a number of resources. We've been specifically focusing on how do we reduce adverse childhood experiences, how to reduce trauma in our communities generation to generation. And it's via focusing on practices of resilience, both at the personal level but also at the community level, and building positive social fabrics around kids and families. And Washington's leading the nation in that work. So there's the article on the neurobiology and social justice leadership points to that research, as well as how important it is for us to be doing that level of resilience work in community. And I think the resilience work that Transition's also doing in community is really important. And oftentimes when we're working in historic trauma fields, we need to know that, because we just have to be able to work in ways that are conscious of that, and conscious of when individuals can go into a stress response. And I think that's true in all our meetings. So there's a wealth of information both in that as well as up on my website. I just wrote a couple blog posts that point to a number of those resources.
Thank you.
And Teresa, I believe your website is on our website as well, but why don't you say what that is right now, and then we'll go to the next caller.
Great. So it's emergingwisdom.net. So emergingwisdom.net. And then I'll also just I'll be posting a link to this talk up there as well, so that'll be available on my website as well.
Great, thank you.
And then we just got back from Nava. Go ahead. Let's hear from Victoria.
Oh, and there are a few other people with their hands up, Teresa, after
Great.
Victoria.
Let's just do that.
Okay. Victoria, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the four-sided breath. I'm going to take that with me. What I would like to say is, when I can remember to do it, and I make time to do it, is how I start my day, how I frame my day. If I can just sit on the couch for a few minutes and be still, that really helps set the tone of the day. Or if I can spend a few minutes sitting in the backyard in the sun with the chickens before I launch into my day, it calms me. But doing the work of building community resilience and getting down deep and getting my hands dirty has also led to a lot of anger and despair and frustration and sadness. And so I'm really focusing inward right now. So thank you so much for helping us today.
Yeah, and just knowing that how essential it is to work with all those emotions in a good way, so they don't kind of settle even more into our bodies. And so thank you for both your leadership, but also your attentiveness to your own your own mindfulness practices. And I hope there's some further resources through Joey Klein's on emotional mastery, the whole CD series, so a longer-term meditation set of exercises if people are interested, as well as the mental mastery series.
And we've got Sage. Go ahead, Sage.
Hello.
You were there for a moment. I think you might have put yourself on mute.
Okay.
There.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Aloha. I'm
Aloha.
extremely grateful for the tool you shared, the breath, and I really love how you deal with all layers of being, and I really, really love that, and I love how it's a very simple, easy tool. I have some pretty deep core patterns that were imprinted on my system, and I'm also both finally jumping into my life's work of community resilience, but I'm also struggling with trauma, and so balancing that is very important, and I really, really love this tool for both of these purposes. One thing I have found is I really have gotten into a much better space by honoring, not dwelling in these feelings, but allowing the lower emotions, allowing acceptance towards them when they arise, rather than trying to squelch them or jump out of them so quickly. It actually allows them to flow a lot more freely. So I really do find that it is important to come with an attitude of love towards these things, and even on occasion, I wouldn't advocate over analyzing anything. I really love the more present, body-centered approach. It's very important. But on occasion, I do find a lot of insight in, these lower emotions. When my trauma is triggered with the fight or flight instinct, I realized in my life, my own growth work, I realized boundaries are really crucial to be cultivating in our own lives and in our community to allow flow and the higher potential to emerge. And I realized that, the fight or flight was actually connected to our system's authentic need to, establish these boundaries. So, having a more open and curious attitude towards these feelings can be also a helpful addition. So I'd like to share that. They're not as afraid. We don't have to be so afraid of them. I think we have more to be afraid of from running from them too much, but also holding good space and holding a very healthy, flowing container of higher vibrations is also extremely important. And thank you so much for this. Aloha.
Yeah. Aloha. And I agree. And being able, I think we've moved from emotional intelligence into this level of emotional mastery. We're starting into it, where we know how to be both working with our emotions as teachers and as, and then also just, working with them in the small ways, the 90-second rule, versus in the big ways, which is like that playing out on major drama in our lives and our world. So learning to help support them in kind of taking their place so that they can be part of our wisdom system, and this deep level of befriending ourselves.
There's 2 more hands up, Teresa. Shall we dive right in?
Let's do that, and then welcoming also is part of that if there's any other questions that come up.
Okay. Priscilla, go ahead.
Yes, I really welcome your process in this, as I'm working in a busy, hectic suburban community here in the greater San Francisco Bay Area on getting groups of people to work on climate change in their own lives and get more invested in it, which I know is putting stress in their lives. And I realize I need to offer some way for them to be able to handle the stress as I put this into their lives, but give them something in order for them to cope with it. And I've recently also been checking in on how eco-villages develop as intentional communities, and I feel like you're offering something very similar. That even in a setting wherever you are, city or suburban-wise, you can get groups of people together and create a community that is on the same page with how we need to face our future.
Yeah.
And I feel you've given me some good tools on how to offer this, say, in a workshop.
Yes.
So I appreciate that.
Yes, you're welcome. And there's another page which is in the resources that we sent out for the call, and it's a one-pager on resilience and some of the ways that we're framing resilience here. And I think it applies both towards climate change, communities focused on climate, as well as how do we reduce trauma generation to generation. So that's a resource there in terms of a framing for resilience that people may be interested in as well. And for the work with trauma in communities, there's a wonderful website that was created in the state here, which is called Resilience Trumps ACEs. And I think it's that whole thing that Transition's also doing is how do we build resilience, and how that level of all those deep levels of well-being as they come into our communities, how it's protective factors against climate change, and the level of adaptation we're going to need to be in. And it's also protective factors around our kids and families.
So that was Resilience Trumps ACEs?
Resilience Trumps ACEs.
Okay, great. And also the resources that you just mentioned, Teresa, are on our website connected with this event, so people can find them there as well. And last hand up for right now is Carolyn Treadway. Go ahead.
Hello again. I have done climate work and certainly am grateful for these resources that you just shared, but I want to bring this back to a personal level. And I have been dealing with shortness of breath for a very long time. I've been looking at with doctors at it for about 6 years. And nobody can find any reason whatsoever, the cardiologist can't, the pulmonologist can't, and so on, for why I should be short of breath upon very, very easy exercise. And we were talking earlier about the link between lower emotions and being constricted and higher emotions being expanded. I wonder if you have any particular resources to point me to explore this question further about whether how to open up my breathing, which is a physiological thing when I'm exercising, and how that might connect to constriction.
Yeah. So I think kind of exploring, that relationship between your thoughts, emotions, and physical body. The book by Joey Klein, it has a 9-week meditation series called The Inner Matrix, and he has a video and things that you can download too, so you can check out the book. And they have a free online series that from his site, joeyklein.com, and it's one way to explore what's those relationships there, and also seeing what happens as you shift, some of the emotional patterning to see if it also shifts what's happening in the physical layers. He also has an emotional mastery series that's useful.
Is this Joey Klein with a K? Klein with a K?
Yes, and that's in my article that you have already. So, I'd like to just thank everyone and for your deep work of personal mastery and self-mastery, and the deep leading yourself as you're in this work of leading in communities and leading in this important time. So I just want to thank you for the gifts of your leadership and then the gifts of your self-leadership, because I think what goes on the inside is so essential for what we want to create in the world. So thank you, everyone, and thank you especially, Caroline, for hosting these calls.
And Teresa, thank you for all the fresh perspectives you bring to community work and just your depth of understanding and caring. So really, really appreciate you. And to all of you on the call today, thank you so much for joining us, and hope you'll join us again on April 8th with Chris Corrigan, one of Teresa's close partners in a lot of this work, working with core teams. So you'll learn a lot from that call as well. So looking forward to the next time we're all together, and have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful spring, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.